I don't know if anyone has ever experienced some sort of amnesia of any sort, but it can be a vastly terrifying thing. I've had it once. All the reading that I had done on amnesia growing up made me believe that people who lost memories would always be happier when the memories finally came back to them. But in a way, if the experience is terrifying enough, getting that memory back can be even scarier than experiencing it for the first time. So, this story takes place in 2 parts, because at one point I couldn't really remember what happened. The first part I remember very clearly though. I lived by myself at the time. It was a small 1-bedroom house in a place called Wonder Lake. I liked it because it was so small. It was not in a neighborhood or subdivision, and it was surrounded by a ton of trees. The next house over wasn't very far away. It was maybe the equivalent of a city block or so away from me. I mean, I could casually call out to my neighbors when we were both mowing the lawn or doing something like that. He would occasionally wave to me when I was mowing mine. It was nice because that was far enough away from each other that I could play loud music or do things like that and not really disturb them, but close enough to have a cordial relationship. The area became very beautiful as the fall came on, and then the winter followed. I had a fun time decorating the house for Halloween, and actually I got some kids coming by to get candy that year. As beautiful as it was in the fall, I was really looking forward to seeing what sort of winter wonderland would come about when it began snowing. The first couple of snows, like usual in this part of the country, were nothing to really write home about. It really wasn't until January that we began to experience the actual heavy snowfall. The snow was falling really hard one night. From what I heard, it was supposed to be several feet that evening. I didn't mind though. I had nowhere to be, and I thought I would just enjoy watching the snow. Now, I was having a nice night. The important thing to note is that I was not drinking or doing any kind of drugs at all. I was just having a regular, nice evening, and nothing else. I was drinking a hot cocoa, and then suddenly everything just went black. That's the best way I can think to describe it. It was like I was just sitting there, and then suddenly I wasn't there, or anything. When I came to, I had no idea where I was at first. It was still dark, but it was not a void of nothingness like I had been in before. I was confused for a few moments, and tried to figure out where I was. I tried to remember back to the last thing that happened. It was by recalling what happened, that I then remembered everything that happened after everything went black. I would learn later that there was a psychological explanation for what happened to me. The memory progressed in my mind, coming back to me slowly, playing like a movie in my head. I was sitting still in the living room, looking at the back sliding glass doors. I had the lights turned out while I was drinking tea and watching the snow fall down, because it was so beautiful out there. I got up and made my way back into the kitchen to make myself another cup. When I was done, I walked and sat back down in my chair once again, and began looking out the doors. Now, I was still watching in the living room with the lights off. There was a light in the backyard that I shined behind the snow. I hadn't been sitting there for too long, though, before I noticed that something was off. The sliding glass door was slightly open. Apprehensively, I got up and went over to the doors. It wasn't open that much, just slightly unlatched. I knew I hadn't left it that way, though. Although it seemed like it wasn't likely someone was actually in the house, I had to go check it out. So I got up and checked throughout. Remember how I mentioned it was a small house? There was 1 bedroom on the ground floor, and a loft and closet up the stairs. The kitchen was on the side of the house, which is how someone could have gotten in without me noticing. I didn't really think that could be the case, though. This is like any situation where you feel paranoid you might have someone in your house or apartment. You're certainly sure no one is, but you still feel like you have to check behind the curtains and everything. I went walking over toward the stairs to check up on the loft. I felt a strong shock go through my body as I heard a noise up in the loft. I was hoping it was an animal, but it was a creaking noise that sounded like someone walking. I could see behind the steps a foot land on the first top step. That was when I knew that there was indeed someone in my house. It was just a terrifying feeling I couldn't describe. I reacted to it with a spontaneous yell and immediately wished that I hadn't. The person on the stairs quickly came down. I noticed that he was a lot bigger than me, and I wasn't sure what to do. I tried to run into the bedroom, but he got to me before I could close the door. There was a struggle against the man, and I guess at the time that I thought it was possible I might be in real trouble. I tried fighting back my best, but I have no problem admitting that I just did not have the strength to do anything. He shoved me into the closet and told me that if I knew what was best for me, I wouldn't come out until he was gone. After that, I just couldn't tell how long I had been stuck in that closet. My mind must have temporarily blacked some of that out. I guess it was such a traumatic experience my brain shut down the memory of it. It only came back when I made an effort to do so. I was still scared and worried. I didn't really know how much time had passed since then. I thought I remembered everything, but how could I really know for sure? After a while, I decided I should get up and check the house. It was hard getting to stand up at first, but I was able to do it without too much swaying. I crept quietly out of the closet and then tried to make my way through the house. It was a nerve-wracking feeling, leaving the bedroom and looking toward the back door. The door was closed, and there were things missing from my apartment. Having missing things should have made me confident the intruder had left already, but I was still terrified looking in the kitchen. The worst part was going upstairs and looking in the loft. I guess most people might be wondering why I didn't immediately call the police, but I just didn't think about it in the moment. It seems more likely for that thought to occur when you're on the outside, but no one was in the loft. I then went and called the police. Nothing was seriously wrong with me, which I'm thankful for, and my insurance did cover the missing items, but the experience itself took a lot longer to get over. I was waiting to get off work one evening when it started snowing outside. I hadn't been expecting that because I don't normally check the weather. I just look outside and see what I'm supposed to see, but unfortunately for me, I did not get off work until very late that night. When I finally did get off work, I closed up the store, locked it, and went out to my car. I had to clean all of that snow off of it, which was not something I really liked doing. You just get all cold and wet when you do it. Driving home was also really hard. It was still snowing very hard. Not only that, but the plows had not really done the best job clearing the streets either. I had to drive very slowly and was still slipping and sliding too much. It took me forever to get to the freeway, and even then it really wasn't any better. The only thing I could hope for was getting home as safe as possible. I really couldn't explain what began happening, though, to my car. It suddenly began acting up, smoke coming in through the vents, and the transmission began slipping. I was too scared to pull over on the freeway because there was barely room for a car on the side of the road part. I pulled off onto an exit I had never pulled off on before. I had no idea where this particular exit led to. There weren't any gas stations or other businesses right off the exit either. It looked like it was just trees and things that were there. I pulled down the road anyway, and was looking for something, anything. I pulled off on the side of the road by a mailbox and a driveway. I then turned off my car and tried to figure out just what the hell was going on. I had no idea what had happened, and I also had no idea how I could fix it. I got my phone out and was trying to call AAA to get them there to help. Although I had their service, I had never used it before. While I was sitting there in the car, suddenly there was some light behind me. I didn't think much of it at first, and was trying to pay attention to my phone, but when the bright lights began making it hard to see, I looked up to change the rear view mirror's position. When I did, I saw the car behind me, and it was right behind me, not completely on the road. I didn't have any time to react. Next thing I knew, the vehicle slammed into me from behind. The car hit me hard and fast. My car flew forward, right through the mailbox that was in front of me, and down in the ditch between the road and the yard of the house. It flew forward far with the other car still sliding on the snowy road, coming right after me. The car turned over on its side with the other car nearly on top of it. It happened so fast, and so slow at the same time. When it was over, I was unable to get out of the car, and that was terrifying. Maybe I had seen way too many movies and just expected that the car would explode or something, but I was feeling it at the time. I kept trying to find a way out, but the whole thing was too difficult. It didn't take very long until I heard sirens coming. Then there were a few people out by the cars asking me and the other driver if we were all right. I assumed they were people from the house, and it was later confirmed that was correct. My leg was jammed underneath the steering wheel, and I was terrified as they were trying to cut open the cars to get us both out. Waiting, not knowing how damaged I was, and feeling that accident happening all over again. It was just too terrifying. I was working at the first really good job that I've ever had. After going and taking courses in community college, I got certified as a mechanic and got a great job working in a private garage. It was in an average-sized city in the north, so we always had a lot of good business. It was my first real good job after high school, and so much better than the normal fast food and retail things I had been doing for a while. So, having a good job, I tried to get a lot of the other things in life that I wanted in place. I rented out a really nice apartment in the city. I got myself a nice car, and I decided I was going to start looking around for a relationship too. I had never really had a serious one before, but after feeling like the rest of my life was pretty in order, I thought I was finally ready for an attempt. This was a little while back, and even though I was living in the city, I didn't have a lot of experience meeting new people. So I used a dating site in order to find someone. For the most part, I really despise those things. I understand people misrepresenting themselves to some degree. Maybe you use an older picture of yourself where you look slightly better, or you lie about an inch or two here or there. But when you lie about your intentions, that's the one thing that really irritated me the most. I couldn't stand when people did that, telling me they were looking for a serious relationship when all they really wanted to do was find a sexy hookup. When I met Brian, that's exactly the sort of thing I was expecting it to be. He was very youngish looking, very cute, and dressed very nicely. He also had a good job. The only thing that was difficult was that he lived about 2 hours away from me. That isn't the most ideal thing for a relationship, but I hadn't been meeting anyone in my city that was serious about it, and he seemed to be. I don't really want to get into too much depth about our relationship. It's sort of important as to what happened though, so I do have to give you a general idea. We had a great time talking on the phone together to each other for about a month or so. I think I was a lot more eager to meet him than he was to meet me, but that was just positive for me. I mean, it meant it seemed like he was absolutely interested in more than just casual sex. Brian and I eventually met, and I can tell you that we had a wonderful first date together. I drove down to his place, and he took me out to one of his favorite restaurants. We then went back to his apartment and cuddled a bit, but didn't go much further than that. I had to go back home by a certain period of time, so we didn't have an awful lot of time to spend together on that first date. When I arrived home, I called him, and we talked for another hour or so. This was a Saturday night. We agreed that we would chat again on Wednesday, after I had gotten home from work. I was really looking forward to that Wednesday coming so that we could talk on the phone. Christmas was coming up soon, and the garage was having a dinner. When we talked the day we met, I invited him to come with me. He told me he would have an answer for me when we talked on the phone next. The next few days at work went by really slowly. When Wednesday came along, I was very excited. I just had this really good feeling, that this would be the time it all worked out. A few hours before we closed up, the temperature dropped dramatically, and tons of clouds started moving in. The wind picked up, and by mid-afternoon, it was howling at what had to be 20 miles per hour. I knew this was going to be an intense winter night, and so, wanting to get home, I got a glass of cocoa and waited for my phone call. The snow began falling about 3 hours before I got off work. My boss had some extra work that night. Normally, I was the first person to stay late and do that, but not only because of the impending phone call, but the snow falling very heavily, I declined to do so that night and left for home right after work. It was bad right away. It was already dark out, of course. It had been for a couple of hours. I had to get on the interstate to get home, and I had a feeling, which turned out to be right, that it would be very crowded. The snow was falling heavily, and it was really affecting visibility. The direction I was going was sort of reverse rush hour. The cars going the opposite way of me were the ones with the most traffic. Eager to get home, I remember driving quickly through the on-ramp, confident my all-wheel drive would be completely okay with it. When I got to the top of the ramp, this is where things took a turn I hadn't seen coming. Even when I think about it now, I cringe. My tires hit some black ice, and because I was going so fast, my truck started spinning out of control. It spun into the interstate, which was full of cars, and that's when it happened. A huge semi-truck was coming right at me. You can't imagine what it was. I mean, this huge vehicle coming right towards me, and to make matters worse, the semi slid on the ice too. It came flying at me and T-boned my vehicle. I thought about Brian, the boy I was trying to get home to talk to, and then everything became non-existent. The semi jackknifed and was coming right at me. In that moment, I knew I was going to die. I did think I was dead. Everything was black and non-existence. It was horrid. It's a feeling that I've heard other people talk about, but can never really explain myself. It was like existing in a pool of nothingness, but also not existing. There are some other moments that don't make sense either. I was able to see again, but not really understand what was going on. I didn't even know who I was. It was terrifying, and all came back to me really slowly. I had some bad head injuries, and once my memory and personality began coming back, I began to slowly get better. It took a long time for that to happen. After rehabbing, it took a long time before I could drive again either. I've heard people tell me they relive accidents over and over again, and yeah, that happened to me too. Getting behind the wheel was the most terrifying thing, and it took me a couple of years to get over that. Fortunately though, I had Brian. He was there for me through the entire thing, and he's still there with me now, so that helped to take away a lot of the horror.